Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fedge, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And our special guest today is Cynthia Crawford, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. First, I just want to let you know we're broadcasting live from Casino Resort in Laughlin, Nevada, and we just had somebody trying to call us on the phone, so I apologize. And we are just finishing up the UFOs, Technology and Consciousness Conference, which had about two dozen incredible UFO extraterrestrial and disclosure speakers. And our special guest today is, like I said, Cynthia Crawford, and she is a contactee experiencer, and she's an ET artist sculptor. And we're going to get into somewhere in the show. She is a human EP hybrid. And so before we bring on Cynthia, I want Dr. Lesson, Sasha, to tell you a little bit about today's show.
Cindy is absolutely wonderful, the real thing. I mean, a person who is a hybrid, who has higher powers of psychic abilities. She creates these incredible sculptures that are empowered with the energy that's put in them of the particular extraterrestrial that she's sculpting. And these have led to incredible healings. I'm saying this person is the real thing, and we are so lucky to have Cindy with us today.
And welcome to our show, Cindy.
Thank you. I am so honored.
We're honored to have you. Before we start our show, I would like you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, the things that come from your heart that you want them to know about you, and then we're going to start our discussion. So take it away, Cindy.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I want to say that I was born a twin, and my twin was, I was born before she was, just 20 minutes before she was, and I was born without an amniotic sac, and my twin was born like a normal baby. And the interesting thing that happened was I remember being taken to underground bases and tested for special abilities and didn't know why. And every time I would try to tell my mother about being taken away, she would always say I was dreaming, that it wasn't real. And I ended up learning then, when I was in my 30s, from my father, that I was a hybrid, part of a government program right after World War II, the Germans, some of the German scientists had been brought over to America to work on top secret projects, and one of those projects had to do with creating hybrids that the government could also use to work for them and do special things that they didn't want to do or couldn't do. So when my father heard about this program, he was quite intrigued, but he also was asked to participate at the same time in another program in which he would go to Korea during the Korean War, and during that time he would be working with alien technology on the critically ill, or actually I shouldn't say critically ill, those people, soldiers that had been wounded to the point where they were not expected to recover. So that way, when they use the alien technology, there would be no witnesses. They just wanted to see how it worked. Because when this technology was found aboard a downed medical transport ship, the equipment has no on and off or instructions with it on how to use it. So anyway, the first thing my father had to do was allow my mother to be impregnated. And then in the early 50s, in about 1951, he went to Korea. So that was quite interesting. I didn't see my father for the first few years of my life. We couldn't know where he was or what he was doing.
Let me ask you a couple questions about all that you just said, because that's a lot of information. I want to kind of slow it down so we can digest it. So we're going to leave off where you didn't see your father for the first 2 years, and we'll come back and pick that up.
Sure.
So you were born a twin, and
right.
you were firstborn, and your sister was born 20 minutes. So were you identical or not?
Well, the doctor said we were fraternal, and the reason that he said we were fraternal was actually it wasn't until later that they found out the majority of the information, but eventually we found out that we were fraternal because she was born in her own amniotic sac, and I had no amniotic sac. When you're twins, you share, if you're identical, you share the sac. Yeah. So,
yes, that's what I wanted to clarify. So you are not identical, and so if you were this hybrid, you're hybrid, and did they implant you into your mother once she was already pregnant with your sister?
No, actually what happened was my father had drugged her, and they impregnated her. And when she found out she was pregnant, this was back, if you can imagine, in 1948, when she was impregnated, the end of 1948, because I was born in August of 49. But when they impregnated her, at that time she had been using God, now I can't think of what it's called. But anyway, it was a device that the women used back in those days to keep them from getting pregnant, because she had already my older sister, who was just a baby at the time. So she had been using that, and she shouldn't have gotten pregnant. So when she found out she was pregnant, she stopped using this device. And what she didn't know was that she was going to get pregnant the correct way then. And so actually my twin sister was, you might say in a way, she was premature, because even though as twins I weighed almost 9 pounds, my twin sister barely weighed under 8. There was a significant difference. So she probably, I would think my mother probably got pregnant within less than a month of being impregnated with me. So it was kind of a surprise even to the doctor when she had twins.
Okay, so you were the first impregnation, and then your sister was a natural impregnation. So somehow you being in the fetus in the uterus, promoted the second pregnancy. Okay. So then you were paternal. Let me look at my notes. And you were born without the amniotic fluid. Is that because the extraterrestrial was just stuffing in the uterus? Is that what you're getting?
Who did that?
Yeah, we'll go back to that.
Yeah, I was just stated in my mother's uterus, and therefore I didn't have an amniotic sac. And I don't know how common that is, or if it was just because of the way the Germans were showing them how to do the impregnation. I don't really know.
Who impregnated you? You know
what sperm was used?
It was the military. The Germans. It was later on, I'll put it this way, later on I found out that NSA took over the hybridization program.
Okay. So these were Germans, not Americans.
Well, the question, Cindy, was the gamete, the sperm that was used, it wasn't a German man. What was it? What kind of species was it from?
Okay, they used my father's sperm, my mother's egg, but what they did was they were in the petri dish combining the alien DNA, and the way it affected me as far as what makes me different than my twin, well, first of all, we had totally different tissue types, totally different blood types. I also had unusual hands and very different thumbs, and my bones were totally different. So were my muscles, but my bones are Zeta bones. So I took on the Zeta DNA when it came to the skeletal part of who I am, because
your bones are. Say it again. What kind of bones are they? What are you saying?
Well,
Zeta.
Zeta bones, right?
Okay.
Excuse me. But the reason
what's a Zeta bone?
Yeah, can you explain what a Zeta bone?
Yeah, the difference between human bone and Zeta bone is that human bone is denser, and Zeta bones are very porous bones. And when I had an accident in 1993 in which I needed a bone implant, they tried twice to put human donor bone in me, and my body kept rejecting it because my bones, being Zeta bones, couldn't bond with it for some reason. And these were radiated bones. So what they ended up doing in that case was they finally, on the third surgery, they had to remove bone from my hip and grow it to put in my shoulder.
Wow, amazing. Okay, so then when were you taken to these underground bases? Did they take you immediately when you were an infant or older or repeatedly?
I only remember some of being down there when I was a toddler. And what's interesting is as I got older, I didn't remember any of it. But what happened was I had a military implant in the back of my head that controlled my ability to remember. So I have very little memory of my childhood, but after I had an accident, it was through an accident that with lots of MRIs on my head and my body that it deactivated the military implant. And when it deactivated it, I began remembering. And I started having these horrific flashbacks about going down. And I remember as a child that when I would be taken by the Greys would come and get me. And then I would be taken to this military base. And then I would go in an elevator many floors below the first floor. And I thought that was odd for one, but then I was just a toddler. And I remember the lights were on the floor, And I remember when I was taken into a room, and that was the other thing, because it seemed awfully dark. The hallway seemed awfully dark, even though it was lighted around the bottom of the wall. I know that when I was taken in a room, then it had regular lighting in the room. Mm-hmm. But they were asking me to see what my abilities were, and I can't honestly tell you what tests they were, but I remember them getting very angry with me because I cried a lot. I was scared, and I cried a lot. And they used to say things to me like, "You do not cry. If you don't stop crying, we will give you something to cry about." And that scared the living deal out of me. But I became...
Did they talk in just your mind, or did they talk with auditory voices?
No, they talked with auditory voices because they were military personnel, military doctors and nurses there that were testing me.
So, do you know where this underground base, where that is in the world? What part of the world is it? Where are you taken?
Well, I don't know which Army base it was, but at the time, we were living on the East Coast. So we lived in North Carolina on an Army base for a while, and then we moved to Georgia when I was a few years older. So this was the one in North Carolina, I believe, that where we were living there. And my mother used to say to me that she remembered as a toddler that I was the only one of the three kids that every morning that she got up, she never knew where she was going to find me. Sometimes she would find me outside, and sometimes I would be sleeping at the front door. And other times she'd find me by the front door inside the house, and sometimes in the bed. But she said I did a lot of sleepwalking is what she called it, because she never knew where she would find me. And I will admit that even as I became a teenager, I didn't realize how much my mother thought I was a sleepwalker until at the age of 16, I woke up and I was a little more than a block away from the house, and there was a being walking behind me.
Wow. Okay. So what kind of being was that?
Well, I later found out after I started making sculptures. I had no idea. All I know is that it was very tall and wore a blackish brown hooded cloak. You could not see his face, arms, or anything. Everything was covered up, but it was extremely tall. And I just remember seeing it behind me, and I kind of freaked out and ran the rest of the way home and hoped I never had another nightmare like that again. But also as a teenager, I was frequently taken up on ships because I remember being pulled up through what I thought was through the roof of the house we lived in, and I remember seeing the bottom side of the ship and going up into the ship, and it used to always scare me because I didn't know what was happening to me.
Wow, interesting.
What was the ship like? What did you notice about the ship?
All I remember was that I was being pulled into what I would call a transport ship now, where I remember the lights on the bottom. I don't remember how they went, because when I would all of a sudden realize I was going up into the ship, I would close my eyes. I was a real chicken. I would close my eyes and say, I'm only dreaming. This isn't real.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me back up in time with your story, because I want to this is such a fascinating story, and I just want to, get more details, because I saw your presentation last month in Sacramento at the UFO Con 2015 Experiencers event, and it was phenomenal, and that's why I wanted to get you on our show as soon as possible, because it's just an amazing story, and I hope everybody takes it to heart. I know there may be the tendency to not believe such things. However, we have approximately, I think the numbers are like 25 million experiencers, and obviously not going to be able to interview them all, but once you start hearing these stories, listeners, I'm going to be bringing a lot of them to Revolution Radio, there's a point where you're going to go, oh my God, something is really going on here. So just, bear with us as we get the details of this story. So I wanted to go back to your father was so intrigued by this carrot that was being held out to him that if he participates in this program of allowing his child to be genetically altered and his wife be impregnated with this alien-human hybrid, that he would be permitted to work on this medical alien technology with the men in Korea who were wounded and not expected to recover. Now, what was a question I had about that? Can you tell us? Oh, here it was. Okay, can't remember my exact question, but I wanted to go back to that because that was fascinating. So, where did this alien technology come from? Have you been able to track down which alien species was providing the technology and to whom? Were they providing it to the U.S. government, to the German government? I'm a little bit confused there.
Yeah, and quite honestly, my father never told me, because when I learned this from my father about being a hybrid, I was very angry. So I never thought to ask my dad, and unfortunately he died a few months later of a coronary. So by the time I gave him the anger, he had died. So I wanted to know more because, when you're growing up as a kid and you're different from the other kids and you can read people's minds and you can hear kids saying, she's a creep or she's freaky, but you read that in their mind. It's very hurtful. And I became even more seclusive because of it. So,
what led you to tell you that you were a hybrid?
Well, I had been having a lot of contact, and I had only told my older sister, and I had had numerous ET pregnancies. And that I did not tell my sister, but when my father approached me to tell me the truth, and by the way, my mother and father were divorced when I was quite young, so they didn't communicate hardly ever with each other. So I think I was 7 when they got their divorce. Anyway, when my father told me this, I happened to be in Seattle visiting him, and my first gut reaction when he told me, because I think he felt that it was time he had heard, he said to me, have you ever wondered why you've been on a UFO so many times? Have you ever wondered why the ETs come and get you and why you're having their babies? And I didn't think he knew anything about it. Now, my older sister didn't even know that I had had missing pregnancies. I call it missing pregnancies because at the time I didn't know what was going on. I kept thinking I was just having these weird dreams that they were taking my baby from me, and then I'd wake up and I was hemorrhaging, and I would be to the hospital and there was no fetus, just an afterbirth.
Did you stop having your period when you were pregnant with the ET babies?
I did, but what else was interesting was by the time I was 24, I ended up having to have a hysterectomy, a partial hysterectomy. So I continued with pregnancy symptoms, and only to find out at the age of 40 when I had some medical issues and had to have my ovaries and tubes taken out, that I had my left tube was plump like a fat hot dog, and they're supposed to be pencil thin, really thin fallopian tubes. And a panel of doctors tried to try and figure out why this was that I had the plump fallopian tube. And they all agreed. In fact, I went in to hear the results of the tests on the tube, and they said they ran every test they could to find out if there was a disease or deformity or whatever. And the end results was that my fallopian tube had normal tissue. It was not diseased or anything, but the doctors all agreed I had had a minimum of 3 or more tubal pregnancies. And I only remembered one time when I had a tubal pregnancy, when I woke up and the baby was taken. And the doctor wasn't sure. They had taken, they did an ultrasound, and then they wanted to run some other tests on me, but I never showed up because the baby was taken right after they did the ultrasound.
Have you ever given birth? Have you ever had a full pregnancy and been allowed to give birth?
I have had 2 pregnancies, full pregnancies, and the second one, my son, when I was 22 and I had him, I was actually impregnated on a ship. And again, because nobody ever believed my stories about going up on UFOs and things like this, they all thought I was mental. I held that in because I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. So I didn't talk about it. And then I finally, as I got older and started hearing other people tell these stories, I realized that I, too, had actually had these experiences.
Now, is his son does he have a human father? Is he a human hybrid?
Well, I will say this. He has an A-negative blood, and all I know is I don't remember the beings when I was on the ship, but I remember being on the ship, and I remember the walls kind of glowing, and being on this table, and they said to me, "You will have a son, and he will do great things in the future to help save planet Earth." And that time is nearing, is all I know. He's never wanted to, I told him this, he's known this most of his life, but he hasn't been able to make peace with it. Because even though he and his children are very special, his wife, he ended up marrying another woman that had actually been an experiencer, who had also found herself out in the fields after having UFO experiences. So I think that was a good connection there. But we've yet to discover more. He's not wanted to jump on the bandwagon.
Okay, and he's how old is he now?
He's old. My son is 44.
Okay, so the son is 44, and he's not really owned this whole information, and he has children. How many does he have?
Oh my God, he's got 6 kids.
He has 6 children.
Yes, and they're all very special, very intelligent. In fact, one of them has the ability, when she was a little toddler, could barely walk, they had a dog that nobody could control. But that little girl, the way she moved her hand and the way she talked to the dog obeyed her. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. She could control that dog. She could barely walk.
So, and then his current wife is an experiencer. And have you had conversations with her about what's been happening with her?
Yes, and they've had experiences. In fact, one of their children, his very first child, he was married to another woman for a short time, and he has a boy from his first marriage, and there was a time they were camping with some friends, and all of a sudden they realized that the son was not in the tent, and they looked all over trying to find him, and they were camping out in the woods. And they finally found him in a secluded area that was enclosed in barbed wire. And when they pulled the barbed wire apart so my son could climb through the fence to get his son, who was standing in the center of this field crying, he asked his son, he said, "How did you get here?" And he said, "The angels came and got me." Now, what my grandkids call angels, even my daughter's oldest daughter had experiences with the angels. These are the small white zetas. They've had experience. Yeah, they experienced only the white zetas.
You know, I often wonder if the small white zetas, they might be behind the 1950s or 60s cartoon Casper the Ghost. Because
absolutely. Yes,
yeah, because they couldn't explain it, so they called it a ghost.
Yes. My granddaughter, the very first time that she had an experience with him, she was 3 years old also. And she kept saying it was a ghost visiting her. And so my daughter asked me to talk to her because she didn't know how to deal with this. And so I came over one day and I laid on the floor with my granddaughter and I said, "Mommy says you have visitors sometimes at night." And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, tell me, what do they look like?" And she said, "They're all white. They're ghosts." And I said, "Well, where do they come from?" And she pointed to the ceiling. And I said, "They come from the ceiling?" And she goes, "No, Grandma. They come from beyond the ceiling, the sky." And so,
very interesting.
Yes. So but you know, it runs in a lot of families.
Right. So you have 3 generations that are having experiences, you know, starting, does it go back in your family to your grandparents or your parents? Have you heard of any stories in those generations?
Well, my mother was a very religious woman, and she had seen a UFO twice, but she said it was the devil, of course. And she said that her pastor had told her that this was Satan trying to tempt them and make them believe, you know, that they were from another world. And these were UFOs hovering over a certain area. My father, on the other hand, now, the one thing I have to say, both my parents, their parents came from Germany, okay?
Uh-huh.
My father's parents were German Jews. My mother's parents were German Protestants, which made me a mess.
Uh-huh.
So we have that German lineage. But then I think, because my father did tell me that he said, "I've experienced them before." And he said he's known them. And then he told me when I got very upset, when he said that I was a hybrid, he told me that he too was a hybrid. But you see, I have to admit that I didn't know anything about this. I had had nobody to help me understand what was going on. So when he said he was a hybrid, it didn't, to me, it was like, yeah, you're saying that so I feel better, right? But I will admit, my father had very unusual ears. And they were rather almost looking a little bit Spockish.
A little bit Spockish.
Yeah,
now, what year was your father born? Because we're getting, like, when did this start? You were born in 49, conceived in 48, born in 49. When was your father born?
In 1926.
Okay, so father's born in 26. So this is pre-Nazi Germany. Was he born in the U.S. or Germany?
No, he was born in the U.S., which I don't quite understand, excepting that when they found the alien technology on that downed transport ship and wanted my father to work on it, he was going to school to become a doctor, and he dropped out 6 months before he was to graduate with his MD. And
wow.
We ended up finding out how the instruments worked, and they work with your thoughts. So it's like telepathic communication with the instruments. So what you did, it's the same thing like when you manifest. You see what it is you want, and you see yourself having it. So when you use this technology, what you did, what they eventually learned, because they tried everything they could until they finally got it to work. But eventually, when they saw an area, for example, I'm just going to give you a little example. One of the patients whose intestinal tract was blown out, with scrap metal and everything, and they were barely keeping him alive, and they expected him to die, at any moment. But what they didn't know was when they were looking at the intestinal tract and imagining the way it should look, all of a sudden, the equipment, this bar-like thing that they had in their hand, actually regrew the intestines. So what they found out was this technology could regrow limbs, organs, skin, everything. It was incredible.
Okay, that we just a couple weeks ago interviewed Randy Kramer, and that technology is being used on the super soldiers, and he was part of the secret space program and went to Mars.
Yes. You see, our government has acquired so much technology from the beings. Some, because they exchanged, from their exchange program where they allowed the ETs to take some humans to experiment on in exchange for their technology, and some they acquired from crashed UFOs. So this particular one, I don't know the history of it. I just know that the technology had something to do with their ship had to be close at hand, because the technology had a tendency every so many days to return back to its ship. So they had to keep it close. And to my knowledge, it was kept in the lower part of a ship, a Navy ship that was off of the out in the ocean, not far from Korea, and that's where they kept it.
Okay, not far from Korea.
Right, and that was so that.
Fascinating, because your father was born in 1926, and he's a hybrid. So this is pre-Roswell. Do I have this correct? He said
yes.
He was a hybrid, and this is pre-Roswell. So
you the
tell you more about how he came to be?
Yeah, okay, so we really, the ETs had been working, they'd been coming to Earth forever, and this had been going on before. Remember, the Germans were making hybrids back in the early 1900s, and the other thing they were doing was they were making clones, and they learned this from the Aryan race. And this was technology that they were, things they were sharing with our government after we won the war. So we were trying to catch up. But also, as I'm sure you've already learned, and we'll even learn more about, our government had been doing time travel even much earlier than we ever anticipated. I think their first time travel experiment may have been in the 50s, but I know for sure that they had been doing it in the 60s. But they also had laser technology, which was part of the ET technology for healing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what was funny was one time I wrote a movie script about an artificial eye created like a spy eye, and in which it replaced a regular eye. And I was working with some ophthalmologists on this script that I was writing to get it right, and one of the doctors said, look, I designed an implant that you put into the eye for those people who have lost their retinas. I designed this back in the late 1980s, and the government rejected what do you call it, patent. They rejected the patent. When they rejected the patent, they said it was because they already had that technology. Now, why? If a person had retinal damage and nerve damage where they went blind, and they could replace the vision with this technology, why would they be selfish enough to hold on to it and not help people that were blind?
That's a very good question. Sasha has a question.
Oh, no, just a speculation. They're using it for military purposes, and they didn't want the civilians to have it.
Absolutely. You were absolutely right. They've got so much they've been doing, and I better not say too much. I want to talk a little bit longer, a few more years, so I should cut my throat by saying too much. But anyway, yes, they do have lots of technology. And that was, a lot of times people would say to me, are you sure your father really died of a coronary from natural causes, or was he taken out because he talked? And I can't answer, because he died shortly after he told me I was part of a government experiment. But you see, to the government, I was considered a flop, like the experiment on me did not work. So they had a total of 5 of these embryos that they had made, and they inserted my mother with one, and it was like in 2012 I woke up and my guides woke me up saying, your sister is Lakota. So somewhere I found out that a Lakota Sioux woman was impregnated with the same sperm, egg, and ET DNA as I was.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, that child is just a newborn, pretty young. It was the impregnate. Oh, wait, when was this Dakota Sioux woman impregnant? I'm sorry, I'll just back up. You woke up in 2012 and you realized that, but when did this Dakota Sioux woman get impregnated with your sister?
Okay, I didn't quite hear. Maybe it's my cell phone, but when say that again. When did what happen?
I think I'm misunderstanding. Okay, and let's go back over that again, because we have one of the best connection because we're just on our cell phones. So you said that your sister came out of a Lakota. You have a sister with a sperm and egg mixture that through a Lakota Sioux woman. How old is that sister?
Okay, she would be I would think she's my age, and I'll explain that, because when they made me, took the eggs and the sperm and so forth, they made 5 sets. They always make extra in case one doesn't work. Hopefully the next one will. So they had impregnated a total of 5 women with the same sperm, egg, and alien DNA to see if any of them would produce a good hybrid. And they felt was a failure because I was too emotional. What they were trying to do is create human hybrids that could follow orders and would not have any ethics. That could, if somebody said, I want you to go out and kill this person because he's a hindrance to the government, the hybrid wouldn't think twice about it, would go out and follow orders. But we actually had morals. And when I found out that I have a hybrid Sioux sister, I talked with another person about this that was very knowledgeable in the hybridization program and so forth. And I asked them, this particular person, if what this meant. I said, okay, so I'm a hybrid, and they said my sister is a hybrid Sioux, and they said she explained to me how they did these experiments because they had to make sure enough survived to find out if the test worked. So interestingly enough, most of my life, especially growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, oftentimes I was mistaken for another woman whose name was Barb. That's all I know. And one guy insisted that I was Barb and that he had an argument with Barb and tried to force me in his car and all this. And he just wouldn't believe me when I said, I'm not Barb. My name is Cynthia. And then it happened also with my ex-brother-in-law who one time drove over to the house and he goes, oh, my God, you're really here. And I said, what? And he said, I swear to God, I just saw you at this gas station, and I thought you were pulling a trick on me. And I said, oh, my God, Cynthia, where did you get your new car? When did you get it? And he said, and I thought it was you. And she said, you got me mistaken. And he said, I really thought you were playing a trick on me. So I drove over here just to catch you and say, yeah, sure you did. And he goes, and it's not you.
Wow.
Yeah,
so
and then
this twin of yours is in Dakota, and that
yes,
was Nebraska.
Yes. So in Nebraska, we had a lot of Sioux. We have a reservation out in the northeastern part of Nebraska, of course, that's a Sioux reservation, and of course in Iowa and all over, South Dakota and so forth. So there were a lot of Sioux people living in Omaha.
So
and
does his sister look like you, obviously, because you're being mistaken, but you're very fair with these very light blue eyes. Weren't they suspicious when...
Did you ever encounter her?
Yeah, weren't they suspicious when this child was born? It looked nothing like its mother?
Yeah, actually, you're right about that. And I don't know too much about it, but I will tell you that I met another woman who... there was a Navajo Indian woman impregnated by an alien, Quiñosito, and she gave birth to her daughter, and her daughter was albino and didn't look at all Navajo, not at all. And so the mother actually gave the daughter up for adoption because she knew that she was an alien child. But her child eventually changed her name to Sonny Cito, and her father is Quiñosito. And I know for a fact she truly is more gray, more Zeta than I am, because I'm only 28% Zeta, and she is probably 60% Zeta, because she looks Zeta. And her father, Quiñosito, came to me, and that scared the living daylights out of me when he came to me, because he had to approve of me before he would allow Sonny to meet me in person. So,
wow.
It's kind of these weird things,
So the Quiñoncito is a human.
A Quiñoncito is a Kevin. He's 100% a hybrid race, but he is an ET, and he's a Kevin, and his race they're very military, and everything about him is military, and even though he's not really tall, he's very powerful, so I have to admit, he had me humbled,
Okay, so we're getting into your contact. Let's look at our time real quick here. We got about 6 minutes before the top of the hour. So let's go finish this part of, so you have several other human hybrid sisters that were used as this experiment and impregnated other women, and you've never met any of those, correct?
I met one, and the way I met her, I was 18 at the time, and this one kid that really had a crush on me insisted that he take me to this show. It was a modeling show for people going into college that were looking for what's the college wardrobe and so forth. So I went with him, and shockingly enough, this woman was coming out as one of the models, and she stood right in front of me. We looked at each other almost as if we couldn't believe our eyes, and it was like looking in a mirror, and it freaked me out. And all I can say is the way we looked at each other, it was obvious she felt the same. And I know she exists, because even when I was married to the first husband, he accused me of being with another man, and because he said he saw me in the car with this other man, and that I looked at him as if I was ignoring him. And he wasn't a very happy man then. My husband wasn't then, and decided I deserved to be punished for being with another man when it wasn't even me.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Very complicated life for hybrids when they run into each other. And
did he hurt you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, did he hurt you?
Yeah, oh yes. My husband became very violent because he thought that I was with another man. And it wasn't me, but he wouldn't believe me. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So these children, you were conceived, and then where were you living when you were born, and where was this all happening? So this was happening in Nebraska, but where were you born again?
Yeah, well, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and then because my father was in the Army from the time that I was a baby, we moved when I was like 6 months old because my mother put us in a nursery while she moved everything to the East Coast. And my twin sister and I stayed in the nursery for 3 months until she got settled. And then we went, back to the East Coast. So, yeah.
So you ran into these twin people that resembled you where in the East Coast?
Where did I run into these people that looked like me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in Omaha also.
Oh, okay. So you lived there for a large part of your life, and you read it. Okay, so let's move to the next thing. What else would you like to say before we go on a break, and then we'll come back and we'll go deeper into your alien encounters? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to go for a break. I misunderstood.
No. We've got a couple minutes before the break. We will hear music. So, what else would you like to say before we do the break? Let's talk about a minute or two about this early part of life.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to say is since I started making the sculptures, I have met hybrids from all over the world that have come forward, and some that didn't know they were hybrids, but after I talked with them, I learned how to discover who's hybrid and what to look for. So so that's something I do for people when they contact me and they want to know if there's a possibility they're a hybrid, or they want to have ET contact or understand the ET contact that you have been having.
What do you look for?
For a hybrid?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me just give you an example, so this will show you. There was an example where this guy called me, and he said to me, he said, my sister and I were adopted. And he said, all I know is I was a little toddler. And my mother...
Okay, talk about the hybrid when we come back. We'll be back in about 3 minutes.
Listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and I am your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and our very special guest, Cynthia Crawford. But before we get back to our show, I just want to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is listener-supported, so please do go over the donate button right now and donate what you can. 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated, and we do thank you very much for your donations, because your donations allow us to bring you shows like this very special one with Cynthia Crawford. Dr. Lesson, Sasha, what would you like to say before we bring back Cynthia?
Well, just continuity. We're talking about Cynthia's visits with the extraterrestrials and her identification of other hybrids.
Okay, so we were beginning the story about the man who came to you, and he was a twin. Continue that story, Cynthia.
Okay, so this young man, who was at the time about 21, we've been emailing back and forth, and finally we exchanged phone numbers, began talking, and he said, I've often wondered if there's a chance I'm a hybrid. And I said, tell me why you first of all think you might be a hybrid. And he said, well, I've had unusual contact since I was a child. And he says, I remember being taken up on ships, but he says, there's a lot of things I don't remember. But he says, I remember having visitations. And he said, my own mother put my sister and I in a hotel room and then abandoned us. And we were eventually adopted out. And as we're talking, we're Skyping to one another. Now, when I first started making the sculptures, the beings would communicate with me about them, a little bit about them, and how to identify them, and so that I made sure that their sculptures went to the right people. So when this young man sent me a picture of his face, he had a lot of the features of an Andromedan, and I recommended he might want to consider an Andromedan. But I said, let's talk and see if there's something else that would be better. Well, as we're talking on Skype, all of a sudden he said, just a minute, I got to stand up. And when he stood up, I happened to see his hands. And I said, wait just a minute, let me see your fingers. And he shows me his fingers. And I said, oh my God, you have got the longest, thinnest fingers I have ever seen. That's not normal. He goes, well, if you think that's bad, you ought to look at my arms. He stood up and he held his arm to his side, and the tips of his fingers came down to his knees. The Andromedans from the Buddhic tribe have longer arms than humans. So that was one of the, yeah. And then the other thing was he had certain facial features, because what happened was star seeds and hybrids that came to Earth during this time primarily came here on missions. So every one of them that I've talked to all feel they have a mission. Now, there's more than hybrids that are created by the government, of course. We've had people where the women have been impregnated on a ship, like I was with my son, and the babies are different. I've also spoken to women who had met a man that, oh boy, this happened a few times, and I know people are thinking out there, some of them are saying, yeah, great excuse. But, for example, one of the women told me that she'd met a man, and she just fell in love with this man. She said he told her he was not from Earth, and she thought he was so charming and so adorable that she didn't care that he said this, because she thought he was just making this up as being different, right? And she got pregnant. And after she got pregnant, he said, I have to leave Earth. I can't stay here, but I will come back and stay in touch. And sure enough, he has stayed in touch off and on with his daughter. His daughter is now a young adult, and her father has come back and forth. She's had these ships come to her. You would not believe some of these amazing people I've met and listened to their stories and what has happened. Now, the Navajo woman that gave birth to Sonny Cito, it was an abduction type thing. So there women who have been abducted and impregnated purposely with hybrids, and they've also been tweaked in the mother's womb. So these are the only ones I know of, because I'm sure there's other ways, but I just know of these different ways because of all the people I've talked to, and I've talked to over 2,000 people. And the reason I say is I counsel with them. I don't charge them for any consultation, because I feel that if I can help a person feel better about their life or find answers about their experiences. That's what's important. If they decide to get a sculpture, that's great.
Cindy, could you tell us about this that you keep alluding to, the sculptures? Of course, we know what they are, but the listeners may not. What are these sculptures, and how did you come to be making the sculptures?
Okay, so first of all, let me say that in 1997, I was taken aboard a mothership and was walked around. It was a medical mothership, and a young man, to me he's a young man, but that was like pretty close to, he was over 7 feet tall. He had blonde wavy hair, and he wore a long robe, had greeted me when I got off of the transport ship onto the mothership. And I had a brain tumor at the time, and I had chosen to die. I chose that I was tired of surgeries. The brain tumor was secondary to an accident I had where I lost a third of my brain and had to kind of start over a little bit. But anyway, so when I'm on this mothership, it is so awesome. I get to see all these people they are healing that had cancer and other diseases or conditions that could be fatal. And he walked me around. I observed that. And then he also took me to show me the hybrid babies that were in kind of like incubators and so forth. And then then they took me into this tube-like thing to heal me. So in 2003, when I was taking classes to learn to work with clay, and I was supposed to learn how to throw pots, but because I have a very unusual thumb, it's shorter than a human thumb, and it's just a little different. Some people think it's cute because it's so different, but I couldn't throw pots because my thumb was too short. And I would get bored in class, and I started taking the clay, and I started sculpting beings, and I didn't know how to make sculptures. So my teacher saw what I was doing and came over and gave me a few clues on how to make sculptures. And the next thing I knew, I was making E.T. babies and E.T.s that I had seen. Now, my teacher loved it because, unbeknownst to me, he was from Japan, and he and his brother used to have UFOs come to them. So he was really intrigued with the ETs, but the rest of the people in the class were freaked out and asked him to make sure I don't make them in class. Could I please just make them at home and not do it? So I was honored. But when I first started making them, I thought I was just making them out of memory. And then all of a sudden, something strange started happening. I started getting telepathic communication telling me how to make them. And then there were times when I would try to make a sculpture and the clay just seemed to be falling apart in my hands. And all of a sudden I would go into a trance. And when I would come out of the trance, I had made the sculpture of a being and didn't even know who it was. The Andromedan was the first one that I had done in a trance. And then I made also the salamander people and so forth in trance. And I made the Ebons, which were in the exchange program in the 1960s between, that movie Encounters of the Third Kind had to do with the exchange program that really happened between our government and the beings of Serpo, the planet Serpo. And
how big are these sculptures? How large are the sculptures you make?
Well, they vary because I make some plaques, smaller plaques, and then I make what we have like Andromedan children, Nephilim children, and then I make, they're mostly busts. So the tallest and biggest one is probably the mantis being, I have one that I make that stands about 20 inches tall, and it's fairly heavy. But it probably weighs about 15 pounds. And then I have another one, then they go from that all the way down various sizes to about, I think the smallest one is about 7 inches tall. Or 8, 9 inches long if it's laying down. I've got an Andromedan child that is 9 inches long from head to toe. And she's...
Before we go on to the sculptures a little bit more, which I do want to pick that up again, I have one question. What do you think is the purpose of this hybrid impregnation program that's going on with humanity? I'm going to go back to that a little bit more.
Oh, gosh, I know of a few reasons for it, and I've learned this from the star people because I've also had hybrid children, so if you can imagine a hybrid being hybridized again with children. Anyway, there's several purposes, but the two that I am most familiar with, number one, there's always new planets being created in the universe, and they're always looking for beings to that they can put on these planets, but beings that have specific abilities, survival abilities. So when they do hybridization, what they're trying to do is hybridize out the weak points and make these beings stronger. So we've got other planets that they're hybridizing for, and other planets, for new civilization on new planets, and then we've got other planets in which hybrids are used, especially on what we call the third-dimensional planets like Earth. And the reason that they are here is because some of these hybrids will have the ability to shapeshift. And I've met several of them that can do it. I, too, have been seen to shapeshift. I don't know if I could ever do it, not now anyway, right now, maybe in the future. But I can't do it at all. It just happens when I least expect it. But
what is the benefit of shapeshifting, a species being able to shapeshift?
Okay. The reason is because right now with the third-dimensional Earth, we are trying to ascend into a higher frequency, higher dimension. And humanity must understand and learn that we are all one. The Creator Source, what they call the star people mostly refer to them as either the Source, Creator, or all that is. Humans refer to them, to the Creator, as God. So it doesn't matter what you refer to him as, but all of us, all of our souls are aspects of the Creator Source. The difference is we are given different bodies to allow us to experience different lifetimes and different worlds. So when we leave one lifetime, we may go to another planet in the next lifetime and experience being something else. Like you may have started out as a Pleiadian, and then after so many lifetimes as a Pleiadian, you may have incarnated as an Andromedan or as a Sirian. So there's so much more to the reality of who we truly are. So the reason for us shape-shifting is to let humanity know that we're nothing to fear. We're no different than humans are. We really aren't. We have souls. We're all connected to the Source. We have to stop with our prejudices and our judgments and embrace one another. I have also been taught by the star people how to work with those very dark forces that are rogue and very negative, so that they cannot control me or harm me. So because I've had these experiences, I also teach this to others who have been victims of abduction and perhaps even experimentation. So I teach them how to be in their power.
So you're working with these forces on an individual level, teaching people how to do the same, that they cannot control and harm you. What do you think is going on right now? This weekend we've just experienced all these horrendous things in Paris and France. Do you think this is part of the dark forces, or is this a governmental, world governmental false flag, or anything in between? What are your impressions of this weekend's events?
Okay, I'm just going to give you my opinion, and because, I don't know everything, even though I'd like to, but my guides, when I was taken up as I was captured by the Draconians and taken to their ship, one of the things I learned by being their prisoner, even though they couldn't hold me, because I learned how to use my powers to get away from them, and they let me go. But anyway, what I learned from them, they told me, if you will leave the light and come work for us, we will give you your own army. We will give you all the money you need and any material things you need while you're on Earth. You will be powerful, right? Well, what I found out later was ISIS. Those that started ISIS, they are truly, some of the ISIS people are Draconians. And they taught me this and showed me this. So I have to tell you that there is an agenda, and we all have heard about the Illuminati, and we've all heard about the agenda of the reptilians. Not all reptilians are bad. There are some very benevolent ones, and we have to understand that this is true about all races of beings in the universe. There are good and bad in everything. We can't learn and we can't evolve without that. But anyway, so I do know that this is part of what they showed me would happen in the future. And this is all about creating a one-world government. If they can get humanity to think that the terrorists are going to be targeting all of us, and they create a one-world government in which they have better control over terrorists and so on and so forth, that's their aim. The Star people want humanity to stop being victims and to stand in their power. They can't do it for them.
So stop being victims. So we have the agenda is to create a one world organization to fight the terrorists. I just heard before we got on the show, and I don't know if this is true or not, but we'll check this after the show, that they're not letting anybody in or out of Vegas because of something about let's say what they said.
Oh, that there's an Eiffel Tower mock-up in Vegas. It was supposed to be a marathon there, and that they had credible information that since they didn't get the Eiffel Tower in Paris, that they were going to stage some kind of a terrorist event in Las Vegas. That's what people told me in the hall. I have no idea if that's accurate or not.
Yes, I heard about that too. And you see, again, this is all about what are we humans going to do about, do we really want to be controlled? And I don't really want to get into the political arena because I'll become chopped liver by the time they're done with me. But, I have communication with the Galactic Federation, and when there's certain information they want me to know, I never know when they're going to connect or, contact me, because I have the ability, and I don't know how to explain it, but when they want to communicate with me, I see them in my third eye as if we're Skyping. And I have no idea what causes this, but the same thing. Like sometimes if an Arcturian captain of a ship wants to contact me and give me information, or I happen to be with an Arcturian that doesn't know who he is, and the other Arcturian on the ship needs me to intervene and help awaken him, they will just come in and communicate with me. Even the Syrian warriors of light, and the Andromedans. And I mean, I never know when this is going to happen. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes I'm on a telephone call and be talking to somebody, and all of a sudden, boom, the Galactic Federation is telepathically communicating with me and Skyping in my head and telling me and showing me what's going on. So it's kind of, go ahead.
You have no control over it. It's one way that you can't request communication. They just communicate with you.
Well, yeah. Now, I can request communication. It depends on what the purpose of the communication is for. I recently have been working a lot with the Great White Brotherhood, as well as, with the other galactic forces and so forth. So they give me information as I need it, and certain information I'm not allowed to divulge because it has to do with protection of those people who be in danger and so forth. But I will say this, that I'm not, I'm just one of thousands of hybrids on planet Earth and one of millions of star seeds on Earth. We're all here to help out. But I do know my star family said that the hybrids and the star seeds, that there will be a time when they will leave Earth because their mission is not to do the work for humanity, but to teach humanity how to come into their power and stand up for themselves. And then we starseeds get to return back from whence we came, and we hybrids and so forth. So there's so much more to this story and why we're really here, and how, we have a history, as people are finding out, even with like Ancient Aliens and other programs similar to that, where they have found evidence beings have been living on planet Earth from all over the universe, have been visiting us and living here for millions and millions of years.
Right. So with that in mind, at one point you were saying that we need to stop being afraid. How, as a hybrid, how would you recommend that to people who are the quote-unquote normal people to, stop being afraid when we have things like the things that were happening this weekend? What's your recommendations?
Okay, well, it's difficult to tell a person not to be afraid with what's happening here on Earth, but what I tell people is the same thing my star family tells me, and that is we need to be in our hearts with unconditional love, and we need to realize that we have a lot of powers available to us. Our DNA, each DNA strand has, as it is activated, gives us additional powers we didn't even know we had. So the more we use unconditional love and learn how to work with the light of Source, and I myself had to learn how to live in the Christ consciousness, and that has nothing to do with religion. So, as we're not pointing fingers at any religion. The Christ consciousness is a universal law, and the Christ consciousness means that those who live with unconditional love, without fear, judgment, greed, prejudice, and who can see the Creator Source in each and every individual in the universe. That is what the Christ consciousness is. It is seeing that we are all one, we are all equal, we are all part of the Source. Our souls are Source aspects. When we realize this, and as we work with love and our light, we can change things. And I'll give you one example, because we have to learn to use that love and to send that love out all over and use our light to change the frequency. So there was a situation, and I was trying to tell my girlfriend. She was driving one time. She'd asked me if I wanted to go somewhere with her, and so she was doing the driving. And there was someone driving on the freeway, very erratic, out of control, and almost caused accidents. And my friend was just really upset, in fact, swearing a little bit. She was so upset. She goes, "Can you believe that woman?" And I said, "Would you like to know how to stop her from her craziness and to get her so that she calms down and stays in her lane?" And she said, "Yeah, right. You can do that, huh?" And I said, "Yes, I'm going to teach you how to do it." So I said, "You and I will both look at the car and imagine the car is in a ball of light." So meaning the woman as well, driving the car, is surrounded by the light. And I said, "I want you to go into your heart and imagine unconditional love, as if you are shooting it out of your heart like an arrow of love." Because that's the way my star family reminded me of how to use unconditional love. And what we do is we imagine that an arrow of unconditional love shoots from our heart into that person's heart. As soon as both of us did it, we were quiet. We both imagined the light around her and the car and sent unconditional love into her heart. And the whole way that we were driving after that, the woman never once changed lanes, and she slowed down. And it was like mind-blowing. So
wow.
I tell people, I said, experiment with it. Imagine, because one time I was being attacked, and my guides immediately told me, surround him in the light and send unconditional love from your heart into his heart. And as soon as I did that, just as the man was about to grab me, he fell backwards, almost as if I had shoved him and knocked him on his butt. And I never even touched him. So you see...
Yes, go ahead.
So you see that as we began using this all the time and remembering it, that is what gives us the power and the protection. So we could change things. If all of us, wherever we went, whoever we looked at, if we began enveloping them in the light and sending unconditional love to them, it would change them from whatever thing they were going to do. For example, a woman in San Francisco told me that there was, this is several years ago, a guy that was a serial rapist murderer on the loose. And she used to love to go up walking in her neighborhood every night. And her husband told her when they kept showing this guy's picture on the news. It was a drawing, a sketch of one of the survivors. And they said, be careful, blah, blah, blah. And she insisted, her husband said, don't walk alone anymore. And she goes, I'm protected. And wouldn't you know it, that serial killer rapist happened to one night be right in front of her with a knife, and immediately she surrounded him with light and sent unconditional love into his heart. And she said to him, you don't want to hurt me. I know you are a good person, and you can give me your knife now. The man was like in a trance, and he handed over and walked away. She got home, called the police. They were able to get the man and so forth. But the interesting thing was he was totally confused, and whatever emotions he had about killing her, raping her and killing her, he didn't have any of those emotions. In fact, he didn't know what he was doing there, quite honestly. So there are so many more powers we have, and we need to use them. But it takes being in our hearts, being in love, to make these changes.
Really apply that to this global situation right now, just surrounding everybody that's been involved in this quote-unquote terrorist action into unconditional love.
And see, now this is a hard thing, because what you have to do is convince people that all they have to do, when they understand how to use their love, and light workers who do that here are doing that now. I've talked to several people that said that they're surrounding Paris with light. But you can do that. I say, I know a Frenchman that has a UFO group there, and I told him, I said, tell your people, because he speaks French, I don't. I said, tell them, everyone they see, surround them in the light and send unconditional love to them. This not only protects them, but it takes away any of their anger or any of the things they're planning to do. It takes away that negativity out of their heart. And we need to do this. And when we learn to do this and not to be in judgment, you see, as we judge, feel anger and hatred, we only continue to perpetuate that same feeling throughout. It's the same thing. If you go to war and you keep creating, if everything you do is all about, I want power and control, no, we will never get out of war. We got to stop thinking we're better. We've got to start seeing people around the world as our equals, as that we are all one with the Creator Source. We've got to stop with our prejudices. We've got to stop judgments. I mean, even God does not judge us, no matter what anyone says. The Creator Source does not judge us. Why would He have created us and allowed us the freedom? And for no other reason, do you think that He created us to judge us and to say, oh, what a mess I made of these human beings, you know?
Right.
So He doesn't judge. He lives by, the Source lives vicariously through us. And I learned this when they reminded me who I was and why I came to Earth. And they had to, because when we come here at Starseeds, we have to understand what it is to be human. So they blank out our memory for the most part, so that we learn what it is to be human before we realize who we truly are, so that we can understand how best to teach humanity to change and to live.
So where's your soul? What source is your soul? What are you? What extraterrestrial being are you as a soul?
Okay, well, what I did learn is that our soul has the ability to create other aspects of itself as it continues in its ascension process. So our soul, for example, my soul has, and I don't know how many different aspects, but let's just say for an example that I have 7 aspects, all coexisting. I do know, because the Arcturians told me this, that in a parallel Earth, I am a blue Arcturian, and in another lifetime, I was Azuma Zeta, and in another lifetime, I was a lion person, the lion people. Excuse me. And what I found out is that my higher self, which is the first incarnation of the soul as it continues to ascend and grow and become master and then go into higher levels of mastery. My higher self is with the Great White Brotherhood, but I have other aspects of me coexisting that are living on other planets, and I've been given the experience a few times of changing this aspect of my soul in this body with the aspect of my soul in another body so that I could be on another planet, and that soul and the other aspect of me can experience this body. So I know it sounds very confusing, and it almost takes going to class to learn all this, and that's what I really, that as we learn this, that this needs to be classes available to humans because, you know, they don't realize we have a lot of beings from other worlds. I don't like the word aliens, so I call them star people, but we have a lot of star people living on planet Earth, and some of them cannot reveal themselves because they're different looking. I met one group that lives in like kind of like an inner Earth, but in Peru, and their planet was destroyed, and they had a ship that survived, and they had no other choice but to land on Earth. And so because they were of a different body chemistry than humans, they emit a toxic type of odor from, like when we perspire, and I'm sure some of us, when we perspire, it may smell toxic, but they have a different kind of blood and so forth than we do. So when they perspire, their perspiration is very toxic to us. And if a human is within 5 feet of them, they will die. And they don't want to kill humans. So they live in inner Earth, but what they have been doing is hybridizing with a lot of the Peruvian people so that they can continue their race of people, and their hybrid children can live amongst not only the humans but also the alien or the star family of these people. I don't know the name of this race. I can only tell you the description of what they look like, and I know where their facility is, but I cannot say because I protect them.
What do they look like?
Pardon?
What do they look like?
Well, they're not really tall. They, for the most part, they average around 5 feet tall. Between 4'8" and 5 feet tall is about where their height is. Their skin, because they have to live in inner Earth, it's very grayish, white looking, because they can't be out in the sun because the humans that have seen them have chased after them, and they don't want to kill humans by having them contaminated. So that's why they try and they have very round, small eyes. They look almost beady and black. Other than that, they... Pardon?
Oh, I just said, So they're round, small-eyed, beady, and black.
Right, and they have very square jaws. Their noses are very small but sharp, kind of sharp feature, and but small and narrow. And their lips are very thin. But this is what they have the ability to do, and this is how they hybridize with humans. They are shapeshifters. So at nighttime, they don't have to worry about being toxic to humans. So they can come out at night and they can shapeshift and to look more human. And the women will walk amongst the bars or restaurants or places like that to entice human men so they can be impregnated. And the men will look very handsome and will flirt with and go after the Peruvian women, and they can impregnate them. But what's interesting was when I was in Peru, and by the way, they came to me before I went to Peru, 2 weeks before I went to Peru in 2000, and told me all this. And when I went to Peru, oh my God, I saw their children, and I understood them. And they looked at me. It was a knowing, because I don't know how else to explain it, but it's like we could look into each other's eyes and recognize each other and honor each other. And when I went to the area where they are underground, you know how you hear that real high-pitched sound in your ears? A lot of us hear that. Well, when I got to that area, the high-pitched sound was so loud and so high that I thought my head was going to blow up because it was so powerful. But that's how I realized, and then I recognized because they showed me the village they live in, or that they go to at night when they come out to, flirt with, so they can have children.
Well, I have a question about that.
Sure.
Do you have any idea how it is that alien extraterrestrial beings, star people, can reproduce with humans? Is there some kind of common, how is that possible, Because, cats and dogs can't reproduce. How is it these beings from other planets can just copulate and reproduce? Any ideas on how that happens?
Yeah, and there's many different kinds where they hybridize them, but they do it genetically through through hybridization programs. But anything, remember now that in the universe there is a DNA strand that is universal for humanoids, that they all have a certain strand in common, okay? And these beings look very human. What makes them look a little different is their features are different. They're shorter, and the only reason their skin is more gray is because they don't get sun. Otherwise, they would have more coloring, And anyway, but because of that DNA, humanoid beings can reproduce. But again, if you're, like, for example, when you talk about the lion people, they were genetically altered. And by the way, speaking of genetically altered, I know we don't have much time left, but I will tell you this. For your listeners, if they want to learn something really incredible, I happened to meet someone, I can't say too much other than it was a person that was in the government of Romania, and there is what's called the Romanian Sphinx. And if people will Google that, there have been some books written on the great room found in the Romanian Sphinx, and in that great room, there were 7 tables that were 9 feet tall. And you obviously know that the beings that use these tables had to have been a lot taller than us, right? So they find skeletal remains in one of the tunnels leading from this great room where the beings were over 30 feet tall. But what was interesting that they found on these tables, when they took a ladder and climbed up to the top of these 9-foot-tall tables, were tile-like formations going across the tables. And accidentally someone put their hand on one of the tiles, and a holographic, almost like watching TV, holographic vision appears above the table, and it tells about that species of being. And then they accidentally were touching 2 tiles at the same time and realized that then the hologram told about both types or races of beings and what the results are for hybridizing, what they will look like, what attributes they'll have, and so on and so forth, the characteristics. So
wow.
Yes, and they also, on these tables, the hologram also tells the true history of planet Earth, not the history we've been told, the true history from millions and millions of years. And there are other artifacts in there that have been strategically placed around the world that actually have to do with the frequency of the planet, so that when or if a planet passes by Earth that has a gravitational pull and could cause the planet to flip or actually cause the planet to almost be torn apart, these particular devices that were found actually cause the planet to stay together. They keep the frequency holding the planet together. So there is so much more information coming out about the truth of Earth, humanity, and other races, and how we've lived on Earth with other races before.
Fascinating. What do you know about the Ancient Aliens besides the Ancient Aliens television program? What's your direct knowledge from your contacts?
Well, the only thing I know is that the different planets have been they've brought all kinds of animals, ocean type fish, amphibians, and beings to different planets when they populate the planets, and with Earth, there have been so many kinds of beings that have lived here, and our planet the frequency has changed. So at times it's been a third dimensional planet, and it's raised its frequency and become higher dimensional planet. And then when it's time for, the way my beings explained it is, Earth is a school for the souls to experience the third dimension and what it is to live in a third dimension and to come into their power. So that's basically that when you think about Earth being a school, when one group, what they call a group or classes, have ascended and they bring a new, and this is between, we know that there's been many new Earths, and supposedly in the very near future we're going to be going through this again. And there will be a new group of third dimensional beings. So, and honest to God, I don't claim to know the truth because I'm always learning. I just share what I learn because things are always changing and we're always growing. But if we don't share our knowledge, how can we help others?
Have you met any Sasquatch, Bigfoots?
Yeah, I experienced them. I haven't met them, but I've experienced them and telepathically, and they're not. I am very saddened by those people that look at them as if they're dangerous beings, when in reality they had lived on this planet before what they called the New Earth, which is the time period of which our planet has existed since the Great Flood, and they went into inner Earth to survive all the cataclysmic events. I can only say, and I'm not saying I have the answers, and some people may disagree with me. My guide told me that there is a celestial body that is coming around. There will be some changes, but we need to understand that it's part of the transformation that will be happening. And instead of fearing it, when we give up our fear and we honor it and we move with it, we don't have to experience the cataclysms.
Right.
It's only the fear in our hearts that cause us to experience it. So there's so much going on.
You said that you worked with the Great White Brotherhood, and that was also brought up by another presenter at the conference this weekend. Who are the Great White Brotherhood? Where's the Great White Sisterhood? And what is their role in your interactions with them?
Okay, well, the only thing I can tell you is from meeting them, because they've been trying to wake me up and get me to acknowledge them. And since 2009, and I wasn't paying attention, and they had dropped books in my lap, had people come to me and give me information, and finally it was through a fabulous gentleman in Australia who helped me realize and to connect with the Great White Brotherhood. And since then, I've been at their council a couple times, pleading cases, and I've also gone before the council when I've asked about what do I need to do and so forth. So what I found out is that the Great White Brotherhood, it's called that. Brotherhood does not mean that they're all men. These are beings that are masters. They have gone to the highest evolution of mastery and now want to be of service to assist other souls. And that's what they do, is they form a union, which they call the Great White Brotherhood. And the reason they called it white is they all wear white robes. Those who have hair have white hair, and there are those that belong to it that have no hair. In fact, I was just absolutely thrilled when I found out that the blue Arcturians that I make also many of them are members of the Great White Brotherhood.
Ooh, okay.
So, and
that
there's
makes
all
sense.
Yes, all kinds of them. And so we have a misconception. You see, the Brotherhood is not a group of people that are controlling the universe. They're only assisting to help all the souls in their ascension process when they feel that the souls need it, because there's been too many interferences. They will intervene and say, how can we help them without doing their work so that they can learn while they grow and ascend? And that's what the Great White Brotherhood are about. They never judge anyone. They love everyone. And they don't even, with the Draconians, let me tell you, when I met with the Draconians, I was surprised that when they knew who I was, and they still, because I could love them unconditionally and honor them, but I said to them, if you are not of the Christ consciousness, I would be so honored to help you transform. And that is the way you can keep Draconians from ever keeping you captive or from ever hurting you or trying to empower or overpower you. You do it through honoring them, loving them unconditionally, but also staying in the light and requesting that you take them to the light. So it's, yes.
I just wanted to, we're running out of time, and I want to ask you, what is your mission? What is the purpose of your life? And at the very end, how do people contact you?
Okay. First of all, my only mission, now that I learned it, primarily I was told that I had agreed to make the sculptures to allow the star people to put an aspect of their soul in them so they can be on Earth to assist the star people as they need assistance, whether it's healing or information or any kind of assistance. And if anyone wants to contact me, if you go to the website, it's called etsculptors.com, or they can email me directly at ctcrawford, 1949@gmail.com.
Excellent. And we have about 4 minutes left before the music comes on the end of the show. What would you like to tell our listeners that they need to know?
I'm going to tell them what the Great White Brotherhood recently told me was the most important thing, that if for any reason we were taken off the earth and had to leave humans behind, what kind of advice could we give humanity so they could survive? And that information was, number one, is to love yourself unconditionally. Never judge self and never judge others. Love others unconditionally. So learn to love without any judgments. And secondly, believe. For all things are possible when you believe. And we know that we can heal ourselves when we believe we can. But as soon as we believe we're sick or believe we're going to die, we're actually creating that reality for ourselves. So we have to be in love, learn how to use the light of Source, and believe in yourself. That's what's important.
So you said you saw the future. Is it written in stone, or is there some way we can co-create the future that benefits all of us? And if so, how?
There are many different future timelines. So what changes the future is as humanity stops being the victim and gets into their heart. Like my guides tell me, get out of your head and get into your heart. That is where we need to be. You will not believe how exciting the future looks when we come into our powers, and it has to do with believing in the powers. It's going to be a phenomenal future, but we cannot change it, even if the planet, if something should happen where we have to leave the planet temporarily or whatever, and then we're returned. The only way we can change it is to first change ourselves. Change the way we think. Change the way we view ourselves. When we change ourselves to being pure love, we begin changing the world one by one.
We have 1 minute left. What's the best way to change ourselves?
By, number one, stop judging ourselves. Stop finding faults with ourselves. And that's my hardest problem. Everybody tells me that because I oftentimes will judge myself, and I need to stop it because I kick my butt when I do it. But we have to stop judging ourselves, and we have to love ourselves unconditionally, because since we are God selves or Source selves, we have to understand, how can we love the Source if we don't love ourselves? And by loving ourselves, are we not also loving the Source? We must find ourselves as being that pure love and the Source itself. And when we realize that, it's easy to love others.
Take care, aloha.
Take care, aloha.